السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ومن الناس من يتخذ من دون الله أندادا يحبونهم كحب الله والذين آمنوا أشد حبا لله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. وصلوا على محمد وآل محمد. According to the narration by our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet commands us to teach our children three things. He says, "Allimu awladakum thalatha khisal." Teach your children three attributes. Hubba nabiyikum. One is the love of your Prophet. Wa hubba ahli baytih. And the second is the love of his Ahlul Bayt, his progeny. And the third, وَتِلَاوَةُ الْقُرْآنِ, the recitation of the Qur'an. So love God, love the Prophet of God, love the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet of God, and also the recitation of the Qur'an, tilawat al-Qur'an. And so this concept of love and affection, and where to express our affection, is all over the Qur'an. The Qur'an is replete with verses on love and affection. The Prophet says, قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةِ. He asks for nothing in return for the services that he provides humanity, which is the guidance and the revelation of the Holy Qur'an, except for mawaddah. Mawadda is to show affection. The Quran says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَتَّخِذُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. And amongst the people, you will find that they will take partners with God, and they are intense in their love and affection to those partners. And those who believe, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, meaning the believers, their love, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ, their most intense love is reserved only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and no one else. And that speaks to a modern phenomenon. When we talk about idolatry, idolatry is not only when we prostrate to an idol or a statue made out of wood or stone. Idolatry exists today. When you take an idol, and when that person could be a celebrity, it could be a famous person, it could be a singer, that person becomes your center of attention. It's what you think about all the time. And what you think about and where your thoughts reside say a lot about what you hold dear and what you love and what you hold significant. But love is a basic human emotion that we crave from the moment that we are born. And so you find that people who suffer throughout their life, people who end up in negative situations, most of the time the ingredient that they're missing in their life is love and a feeling of significance. And by the way, when we talk about love, we don't only mean romantic love, the type of love that exists between spouses. But love is more general than that. You can have love for your brothers, your siblings. You could have love for your brothers in faith. You could have love for other people that you share humanity with. So it's a basic emotional need. If you look at if you look up the word love in the dictionary, it's described as a feeling. But some psychologists say that it's not just a feeling. More than a feeling, it's an emotion. And what an emotion does is that it puts you into motion. Emotion creates an action. And that is in line with what the Quran says. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ, say to them, Ya Rasulullah, إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهِ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهِ. Say to them, Ya Rasulullah, that if you claim to love God, if you claim to have that emotion, فَاتَّبِعُونِي, then follow me. Follow my commands. Follow my recommendations. يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهِ. God will love you in return. And so some people, their love is not really an emotion, it's just a feeling. It's the way they just feel about something, and sometimes that feeling can subside. But it's part of our psyche as human beings. It's something that we crave from the moment we're born into infancy, into childhood, into adolescence, and then into adulthood. And it's very much a part of who we are, and physically, love can also have certain effects on us. You know, they talk about some people die of heartbreak syndrome. Couples who live together for 60, 70, 80, 90 years, and then one of the spouses, one of the partners passes away, and all of a sudden, soon after, the other one passes away. Heartbreak syndrome, it's something that actually affects us on a physical level. It can affect our health. But it's something that all of us need, and it's a basic human right. I say this because sometimes people have a tendency to withdraw or hold back their love because of something that has happened to them during their childhood. Maybe someone did not love them enough, and so when they grow older, they tend to hold back their love and their affection. And sometimes that can be a very torturous, it could be a very tormenting experience. I was reading a book recently, and a therapist was describing, some of his interactions with some of his patients. And so this therapist, he says he learned from another therapist about the concept of an emotional tank, which basically refers to the idea that each and every one of us has an emotional tank. In the same way that your car, your vehicle, has a gas tank, and if you don't fill it up with gas tank, or if you don't charge your car, if it's an electric car, it doesn't run. There's no other way for it to run. So the way that we run, the way that we're able to operate, is if our emotional tank is full. But for some people, they live their entire life and their emotional tank is depleted. And so this psychiatrist, he said that when I learned this, I began to see my patients in a different light. I began to understand and analyze their behaviors and their choices in a different light. So he cites one specific example. He says, one day I was counseling a girl, a young lady who was only 13 years old, and she had gotten into an illicit relationship, a compromising relationship, and she had contracted a disease. And so looking from it on the outside, he says, when you look at it on the outside, and if you're not professionally trained, why so young, 13 years old? What was the need? What was the need for all of this to happen? So he says that as I was counseling her, she began to reveal some things about her life, about her early childhood. She says that when I was 6 years old, my father left the family. He left my mother and I. And so I did not feel loved after that. And I felt like, I had done something to make him leave. When you're young, you're innocent, you're not able to see the negative side of people. And so when someone wrongs you, it's natural to think that maybe you've done something wrong. Again, it's that whole idea of taking things personally when someone does something wrong to us. Not acknowledging that maybe that person has some deep-seated problems that I don't know about, and they're simply projecting it through some sort of bizarre behavior. So she says, my father left and I didn't feel loved. She says, when I was 10 years old, my mother remarried. And so she says, in my mind, I felt like my mother now had someone that loved her, but I still didn't have somebody that loved me. And so a few years later, she ended up in this relationship. And so what this psychologist talks about, he says that the conclusions that I began to draw is that yes, it's true. People, in fact, do have an emotional tank. And for them to operate properly, for them to be able to operate at their optimum, their maximum, for them to be able to give love, for them to be able to be productive members of society and exhibit the proper behavior, their emotional tank has to be full. And so he writes a book about that, and he explains how to fill people's emotional tank. But what's interesting is that word, the word love, it's very commonly used, but it's also very confusing. What does that mean? So people claim to love things, right? You claim to love a movie. You claim to love some sort of cuisine or some sort of food. I don't know, Cheetos or Jell-O or whatever it is. And then he says in the same breath, or in the next breath, you also say, I love my dad and I love my mom. How does that square up? How can you love an object such as a food type and love your parent or your family member, and you use the same word to describe your emotion or your feeling towards both ideas or both beings? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So he says it's a very confusing thing. You know, people say that, you know, for instance, I love my job and I love my family in the same breath. And your job tends to keep you away from your family for 8 or 10 or sometimes 12 hours, because a lot of people, they also bring their jobs home with them. They also bring their careers home with them and all the emotional baggage. So if you love your job, why is it that you're leaving your family? And so people use the word love, they throw out the word love, so it becomes very, very confusing. Now, to add to the confusion of that is that you have love as a feeling or as an emotion, but you also have the in love experience. When people fall in love. And that takes people to a completely different mode. It takes people to a completely different realm of operation. So there's 3 points that I want to make. Number one is, what is love truly? I mean, if you're to base your definition of love or your understanding of love by what you see on social media, when you're scrolling through Instagram or Snapchat, or by what you see on TV, or by what Hollywood portrays. You know, so many times, and Hollywood has a way of portraying, you know, the love story, the Romeo and Juliet story, the cowboy picking up the distressed lady story and riding off into the sunset. And everything is fine and dandy. What they don't show you is what happens after they cross that mountain pass, and how she's tired and how her feet hurts and how she's hungry and how he's annoyed by the fact that she's hungry and all of the little complexities. So we learn about the in-love experience, but we don't really learn about the true love experience. And the true love experience, not the in-love experience, is completely different. And so the same psychologist, he talks about the in-love experience. So what's the in-love experience? The in-love experience is when you have your head in the clouds. When most people lose their rationality, they become irrational. Have you noticed, and you see this example, a couple, young man, young woman, they fall in love, and as a sign of them falling in love and having that experience is that they're willing to do everything for one another. He's willing to do everything for her. If they're sitting in the home and she's thirsty, He's willing to break the floor and start digging a well to pull out water. That's what happens when people are in love. So what he says is that the average, based on studies, the average in-love experience lasts for about 2 years. And then people's heads are no longer in the cloud. They come back down to planet Earth with all the other common folk. They plant their feet on the ground. And they realize that they don't have that feeling. They don't have that experience anymore. And so that same couple, when she now asks for water, what does he do? He points to the kitchen faucet. He says, "Bifan, there's your water. It's what you want. It's right there." So what is it that makes people behave in one way and then behave drastically in another way? You know, in Arabic and Persian and Middle Eastern literature, you have those love stories. One of those prominent stories is in Arabic literature, and it's also been translated into Persian, is Layla wal Majnoon, right? You have the madman, the Majnoon, Qais ibn al-Mulawah, that was his name, but he was known as the madman, Majnoon, because when he saw Layla, he fell head over heels in love with her, and he went crazy. And he went from being a rational human being from a prominent tribe, someone who is well respected, who was looked upon with honor and with grace, to all of a sudden being this crazy man who goes around babbling and the narrations, the historical narration describes him as someone who would sit in the dirt, and he would draw lines in the dirt and play with the dirt, and he would roam from one area to another area within the Arabian Peninsula, and he wouldn't realize where he was until he would reach the boundaries of one nation, and then he would turn to, and eventually, he found himself in the wilderness, between the gazelles, trying to eat the flowers and eat the plants, and eventually he died in a valley between the rocks because he went crazy. He was a madman. He completely lost himself. And that story has been translated in different ways. And in English literature, you have Romeo and Juliet, and they were willing to kill themselves out of love. Was it Romeo and Juliet or Hamlet? One of them, whatever. The Shakespeare stories. So that effect can actually happen to people. But is that what we're searching for? When you're looking for security, when you're looking for partnerships, when you're looking to develop proper partnerships, is that what you're looking for? That in love experience, unfortunately, it doesn't last for 100 years. I mean, imagine if it did last for 100 years. We would have a bunch of madmen and a bunch of madwomen running this world as if we don't already have it, and we need more mad people running the world, right? So, fortunately, that dies off, but that doesn't mean that love also has to disappear. So number one is understanding that out there are distorted images of love. And so we need to properly understand what love actually is and how to establish a proper relationship. So another point to that is that when we are also in love, and I talk about this because when you're younger, your hormones are racing, and it's easier to fall in love. It's much, much easier to fall in love, and it's much less intentional. But when you fall in love, you all of a sudden you become very altruistic. You become Mother Teresa. You're willing to go to the ends of the earth for that person. Now the danger behind that, what tends to happen, is that sometimes you get into a situation where somebody does not feel about you the same way you feel about them. Have you ever had that, growing up, and once children begin to understand, they get to a certain age and they begin to understand that they could form a clique, they can form a group, and they can start leaving the kids that aren't cool outside of the group. So that happens in elementary, and then it kind of develops in junior high and high school, and by college nobody even really cares about each other because there's tuition to pay and bills to pay, and so there's bigger fish to fry. But one of the most frustrating feelings is when you feel some way about one person and they don't feel the same way about you. So you think that you're this person's friend, or this person is your friend, but then you realize that they don't necessarily feel the same way. Or you feel that maybe you are going to trust this person, but then they can't trust you, or the other way around. It's a very, very frustrating feeling. When it comes to love, that can also be very, very damaging. And the issue sometimes is that we expect more out of finite, limited objects than they can actually deliver. And that's why we need to understand where to give our love, where to give our time, where to give our energy. So as mu'mineen and as the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, we're taught that the number one, at the top of the list of whom we should furbish our hearts with when it comes to love is God, the Prophet, and his Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Because the love of God, the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is infinite. Meaning if you have furnished your heart with the love of God, then you won't begin to expect love and affection from objects or from people who cannot give back that love, who cannot reciprocate that love. And sometimes we seek happiness and joy and love and compassion from finite objects. I'll give you an example. There was a study that I was reading a few years ago, and the study suggested that there's a certain number of people, there's a certain percentage of people, and it was a pretty high percentage of people, who actually have an emotional attachment to their vehicles, their cars. It's okay to be a car enthusiast. I enjoy cars myself. I grew up here, I enjoy cars. But there's a difference between that, being an enthusiast, and having a borderline weird romantic relationship with the car. You know what I mean? If you've seen the movies, where the car, it has a make and model, but not only a make and model, it has a name, has a nickname. And the way that he cleans his car, the way that he waxes his car, the way he shines his car, he shows more affection to his car than he does to his children. And it's funny, but you know, this is a serious issue. This is one issue. This is one reason why relationships, people get neglected in relationships, is because we show more love to something that cannot love you back. The car cannot spread its arms out, at least not yet. Maybe they're now developing the technology, but it can't spread its arms out and hug you and say, I love you as well. And you can't feel that actual love from it. So when you put your love into a being or an object or an entity which is finite, which is limited, and it can't reciprocate that, what happens? Well, you get disappointed. You have high hopes, and so you get disappointed because your expectations are not met. And so knowing whom to love, there's one narration, it says that the happiest of people, and this is from one of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, he says, the happiest of people, the most joyous of people are the ones that love us first. They have realized that our love, the love of the Ahlul Bayt, the progeny, the pure progeny of the Prophet, is the most fulfilling and most rewarding type of love. So that's a second point, is not to have very high expectations in things that cannot actually reciprocate that love. And number three is understanding the difference between love, actual love, and falling in love, that falling in love experience. So going back to what this psychologist talks about, he says that, well, falling in love, it's one difference between falling in love and love, true love, is that falling in love it's effortless. It happens sometimes by accident. But to maintain true love requires juhud. It requires a struggle. It requires for you to constantly love and give love and refine your love on a regular basis. So the thesis behind the book that he wrote, and maybe some of you have heard of this book, and I highly recommend it to everyone. Now, whether you're married or whether you're not married, if you're not married, it's going to put you at an advantage. I can tell you that, because you're going to go in, bulletproof. You're going to go in prepared. If you are married, it will take your marriage to the next level. And if you don't want to get married, it will still help you, because again, love doesn't have to be a romantic love. You can love someone in that you can make them feel significant. You can love a sibling or a family member, not in a romantic way, to make them feel significant, to make them feel important. So the book is called The 5 Love Languages. Some of you have probably heard of this book. So just to give you a little synopsis, he talks about how human beings, in order to keep that emotional tank full, there are different love languages. And each person has a different love language. So what are the 5 love languages? Well, one of them is physical touch. One of them is words of affirmation, when you give people words of affirmation, words of love, words of support. When you're generous with your language and with your speech, and when you're kind in your speech. One of them is acts of service. One of them is quality time. And one of them is receiving gifts. So each person has a love language. And when he talks about, he says, sometimes we're very, very frustrated because we believe that we're giving love, but because we're not properly speaking our partner's love language, it comes across as if we feel we're not appreciated, because they don't really feel loved. But for a person to feel love, you have to understand their love language. You have to understand that there's something specific about them. That's why, again, sometimes we see Hollywood movies and we think, oh, what he did was very, very smart. So I'm going to go to my wife and I'm going to go to my fiance and I'm going to show her the same kind of love that he showed. And it's doesn't work out, because it's not the same person. Each person is unique in their preferences and their desires. Have you ever been in a situation where husband or wife, and you do something for your spouse, and maybe that's your love language. For instance, you come into the home, gentlemen, and you go on a cleaning spree. You clean the house from top to bottom, you do the laundry, you vacuum, you cook, and then you expect your spouse to be ecstatic about that, but she's not very excited about that. And then what happens in return is you feel frustrated because you think, well, I did all of this for you, why don't you reciprocate that loving feeling for me? Well, sometimes it's not about acts of service. Sometimes it's about quality time. Some people, in order for them to feel loved, they want quality time. In today's day and age, however, we assume that some people, they want gifts, and so we think that we have to go out there and we have to work 18 or 20 hours a day and go and make $500,000 at the expense of time. So we miss out on giving our children quality time. We miss out on giving our spouses quality time. And because of that, they do not feel fulfillment. They do not feel loved. So it's important to understand, to get to know who your partner is. The reason I say that is because sometimes, even with love and loving someone and showing affection, we can be very selfish. We tend to assume that our partner or our spouse enjoys and loves the same things that we love. So love sometimes becomes a love of receiving. It doesn't become a love of giving. However, when you focus on giving that person what they want, that's true love. Not only just receiving. It says that one day a man was telling his wife, he says, look, he says, honey, you're always asking me for things. He says, you're always saying to me, give, 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 give. You're always asking me for stuff. He says, what's the deal? I do everything for you and I never refuse you. She says, well, what do you want? She says, well, one day I just want you to say take, meaning that I want you to give me something. So she picks up an old pair of shoes. She says, oh, go take this and go take it for repair. So she couldn't understand what he wanted and he could not understand it. And so the whole dynamic was off. And so sometimes we have to understand that love is more about giving than receiving. Once you learn to become a giving person, it's much, much more fulfilling and it's much more gratifying than constantly receiving. I say this because if you study the life cycle of the human being, as babies, when we're born, babies don't really give a lot. And if they do, it's very, very unintentional. Babies are actually very selfish. They want you to do everything for them. You have to clean up after them. You got to put them to sleep. You have to give them love and affection. You have to feed them. You have to do everything for them. They're takers. They're not givers. And sometimes you could say, well, they give out their love and their affection and their smiles and their cutesiness. None of that's intentional. Okay, none of that's intentional. That's just very, very selfish. So as we grow, naturally, we learn to become less dependent on people. We become more independent. We learn to tie our own shoes. We learn to feed ourselves. In fact, children go through a stage where they're stubbornly independent, where they don't want you to do anything for them, right? They turn to mom and dad and say, no, don't feed me. I want to grab the spoon on my own. I want to grab the food on my own. I want to put on my shoe. And whenever they do it, it's always wrong. It's always left shoe on right foot on left shoe. Or the buttons are mismatching. It's always wrong, you know. But you got to be nice to them. You know, what are you going to do? You can't point and tell them you're wrong. You know, you don't want to hurt them. You don't want to hurt their ego at such a young age. But we begin to develop independence. The height of our maturity, though, comes when we begin to give to other people without expectation of return. So when you truly, truly love, when you reach the height of love maturity, if you will, you realize that love is less about receiving and more about giving. And once you take that into your consciousness, and once you take that into your understanding of what love is, number one, you become less frustrated. Because now, you're not taking things personally, and if someone doesn't reciprocate that love and affection, you don't really get hurt by it. Now yes, in a healthy relationship, in a healthy husband and wife relationship, there should be some give and take. I'm not saying, because some people can take it to the extreme. And it's very, very unfortunate. Some people, they remain in abusive relationships because they believe that they have to deny themselves and they have to completely give and give and give. So what the psychologist talks about, he says, what some people see as love can also be codependency. The wife who has to pick up the pieces after her husband's alcoholic rage, she sees it as love, but any rational person would see it as codependency and enabling that person. So there has to be some give and take. But when you're out there in the world, when you're giving love to people, when you're giving importance, when you're assigning importance and significance to people, sometimes people are not going to reciprocate that. They're not going to reciprocate your emotions and your feelings. And so understanding that love is a love of giving and not a love of receiving. And that is what we learn from the behavior of the Prophet and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. See, the Prophet loved and he gave love. Whether people loved him back or they did not, it didn't matter. Imam Ali alayhi salam, the same way. And Imam al-Hasan al-Mushtaba alayhi salam, same way. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, same way. Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Ali ibn al-Hussein alayhi salam, same way. And there are so many stories to illustrate that. One story, it says that one day a man comes to Medina and he sees Imam Hassan al-Mushtaba alayhi salam. And this narration has been recorded. Some attribute this to Imam Hassan, some to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Doesn't really matter which, the story remains the same. But as soon as this man sees the Imam, he begins to curse at him. He begins to swear at him. And so the Imam is patient. He's listening to him. He's waiting for the man to stop. And finally he stops. Now why was the man doing this? Obviously he was ignorant of who he was addressing. And Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan had spent years deliberately and intentionally, had spent years making sure that people were brainwashed. To the point where when the people of Syria, when the people of Sham, when they came to the Battle of Siffin, and they saw that Imam Ali alayhi salam actually prays, they would bite their hands out of shock and disbelief. Because they were brainwashed into thinking that Ali ibn Abi Talib, he doesn't even pray his 5 prayers. Imagine how hard Muawiyah worked to brainwash the people. So, out of ignorance, and some people out of ignorance, it's interesting when we say the word jahil, when we say the word jahl or jahiliyyah, where does that come from? Jahiliyyah, we tend to think means ignorance. But in Arabic, in old Arabic, jahl, I mentioned this I believe maybe in the first or second lecture, jahl was when you were rabid and confrontational. That's where that comes from. Being rabid and confrontational. When you can get in somebody's face, when you don't hold back. So there's a relationship between being confrontational and ignorance. It's usually the most ignorant and most unintelligent people who are the loudest in the room, right? And so this man begins to insult him, the Imam waits. Once this man is done, the Imam turns to him and he says, you're a traveler, correct? You're not from here. It doesn't look like you're from around here. He says, yes, I'm a traveler. He says, do you have shelter? He says, if you don't have a place to stay, you can stay with me. He says, if you don't have food to eat, come to my home. I will host you. I will feed you. He says, if you need people to be around, I will be your host. And so this man was completely shocked. I mean, this came out of nowhere. He didn't expect this at all. But the reason why Imam Hassan alayhi salam was able to rise above is because his heart was full of love and compassion. When you have true love, what people say to you, the nasty things that people say to you, you realize that it's not about you. And that you need to continue to love those people. Now there's also tough love, and that's a different story. We can also have tough love towards people. But see, the Imam had furnished his heart with love. So what does this man say after all of this? He turns to him, and in the narration says that the man said the following, that he said that I realized that there was no one in this world and in this universe that I loved more than Al-Hasan alayhi salam and his family. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I realized that there was no one in this universe that was worthy of my love in the same way that the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. I mean, what kind of akhlaq and etiquette? See, when you go out there in the world and you want people to love you, the best way to win people over, the best way to win people's hearts over is by your conduct, by your kindness. Be kind to people, brothers and sisters. You don't know how much people are struggling. Sometimes people are struggling with demons. Sometimes they're struggling with poverty. Sometimes they're struggling with abusive relationships. Your kindness, your random acts of kindness and generosity and love, it can go a very long way, even if you don't get anything out of it. Let's be less transactional. You know, one of the failings of the human being, one of the flaws, the character flaws that holds us back is sometimes we're too transactional. We're always looking at things like, what can I get out of this relationship? But when you truly have love for people in your hearts, then you don't look at those things anymore. So to wrap it up, let us learn to love one another. Let us understand one another. Spouses, or if you are planning on getting married, or if you have a significant other, let us learn what is significant to one another. You know, sometimes it's not about, yes, providing the home, providing the vehicle, having a career, all of that is important, but knowing how to truly express your love. Sometimes it's just words of affirmation. Sometimes people don't really care about gifts. They don't care about acts of service. Sometimes people don't really care about quality time so much. Have you noticed? Some people, they get their love fix not through quality time. You don't even need to spend quality time with them. Sometimes it's something as simple as a word of admonishment or a word of affirmation. And I'll end with this. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says the following: He says that when a man, and we said there's a difference between being a male and a man. You're born as a male, but to be a man, it's a choice, it's a transformation that you have to go through. He says when a man says the following to his wife, when he shows his affection, when he says, I love you, that is something which is inscribed in her heart. That is something which she never forgets. So your homework tonight is to go home and tell your wife that you love her. And if you're not married, reserve it, say it to your mother or say it to your sister. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to furnish our hearts with His love, with the love of His Prophet, with the love of His Ahlul Bayt, with the love of the recitation of the Quran. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring relief and comfort and stability to all of those worldwide who are in need of our supplication, who are in need of our dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us in these final few days of the month of Ramadan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not allow this to be the final chance for the final opportunity for our forgiveness and for our salvation. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك قاضي الحاجات إنك على كل شيء قدير برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.